Okay, let's get into this. Today, we're exploring a case that really deeply affected Singapore back in 2004. We're talking about the disappearance and the tragic death of 8-year-old Huang Na.
It's an incredibly sad story, and quite complex, too. What we're doing today is basically walking through a detailed account of the investigation, the timeline, the evidence that emerged.
Right, and our goal here is really to understand the sequence of events, the people involved, and, importantly, the impact this case had on the community and even on law in Singapore.
So first, let's talk about Huang Na herself. She was just 8 years old, described as lively, very loved. She'd moved from Fujian in China to Singapore in early 2003.
And that move was with her mother, Huang Ying. They were looking for better opportunities, right? Especially for Huang Na's education.
Exactly. They lived near the Paseo Panjang Wholesale Center, which is quite a busy place. Her mother worked there really hard as a vegetable vendor. And Huang Na, when she wasn't at Jintai Primary School, she'd be helping her mom, playing around the market.
And the accounts really paint a picture of a mature little girl for her age.
They really do. Diligent, filial, that comes up a lot. People in the market seemed to genuinely love her because she was kind, helpful. Her dream was apparently to become a doctor.
To help her family, yeah. That says a lot.
It does. And this maturity, it seems, wasn't just personality. It was partly born out of necessity. Her mother had to go back to China quite often.
To care for Huang Na's younger half-sister, who was just an infant, about 11 months old at the time.
Right. So when her mother was away, Huang Na would stay in Singapore. Technically looked after by her mother's friends in the market, but largely, she was on her own a lot.
An 8-year-old. Cooking for herself sometimes, commuting alone on public transport.
Managing her daily life for periods. It speaks to her resilience, definitely. But it also, tragically, highlights a certain vulnerability.
Okay, so let's look at the timeline leading up to when she disappeared. Her mother left for China on September 27th, 2004.
And the last time they spoke directly was October 10th. Huang Na called her mother from a public phone. Just a 6-minute call.
Asking for normal things, yeah.
Yeah.
An English dictionary, maybe a computer, some slippers.
This is everyday kid stuff. Completely unaware, of course, that it would be the very last time her mother heard her voice.
And that same evening, October 10th, the friend who was supposed to be keeping an eye on her realized she hadn't come home, say by 9 or 10 p.m.
Yeah, she waited, hoping Huang Na would turn up. But by the next morning, she still wasn't back. That's when they reported her missing.
The initial descriptions were a bit confusing, weren't they?
A little. The friend said she last saw her barefoot, blue denim jacket, shorts. But then other people reported seeing her later, possibly wearing slippers. There were these strange accounts, too.
Right, about people seeing her walking, asking where she was going, and she'd just smile and walk on, not answer.
Exactly, which in hindsight is quite chilling. It could be shyness, maybe independence.
Or
it could suggest she was already with someone she knew and trusted. Or on her way to meet them.
Makes sense. It sort of points away from a random stranger abduction, maybe.
Potentially, yes. Well, the news hit Singapore hard and fast.
It became huge news, didn't it? A massive search effort kicked off. Police, other agencies, the public too.
Absolutely. Posters went up everywhere. They even extended the search beyond Singapore, looking into Malaysia and Indonesia.
And her poor mother, she rushed back from China, obviously frantic, joined the search herself, looking everywhere, even apparently following leads from her relative's dream. Bukit Timah Hill, Fort Canning, just desperate.
Understandably. Police explored different angles initially. They asked the mother, could there be enemies? Could it be kidnapping for ransom?
But she denied all that. Said everyone loved her daughter.
The police search was thorough. Places Huang Na knew well, abandoned areas, construction sites, parks like Sembawang Park, even big places like the IMM building.
And the public response was pretty incredible.
It really was. A businessman offered a $10,000 reward, which later went up to $15,000. Volunteer groups like Crime Library got involved, using their own staff to help search and hand out flyers.
Even taxi companies, right? Comfort Delgro put posters in their cabs?
Yeah, and across the border too. Malaysian taxis, coffee shops in places like Johor Jaya, Skudai.
Yeah.
They put up posters too. It shows how much this little girl's disappearance resonated.
But despite all this, days turned into weeks. Over 20 days passed. No sign of her.
A really agonizing time. Police kept interviewing people connected to her, people at the market. And that's when their focus started to narrow.
Onto one specific person, Tuk Leng Hao.
Exactly. Tuk Leng Hao. He was 22, a Malaysian guy from Penang working right there at the wholesale center. Lived nearby too.
And he knew Huang Na well. This wasn't a stranger.
Not at all. They were close. She apparently called him Uncle Choo Choo. They played together. She'd even sit on his motorcycle sometimes. He'd worked at her mother's stall before, even lived in the same flat for a while.
So there was a real history there. Familiarity, trust, presumably.
Which makes his behavior, when the police first questioned him, quite suspicious, looking back. Reports say he seemed nervous, wouldn't make eye contact, gave hesitant answers.
And his first story was very simple, wasn't it?
Very. He said, yeah, he saw her that day, barefoot, jacket and shorts. Said he gave her mango, she ate it, walked off. He claimed he didn't pay attention after that.
That simple story, plus the nervousness, raised some red flags for the police, you'd imagine.
Definitely. So they pressed him harder. On October 20th, they brought him in for more intense questioning.
And that's when his story changed quite dramatically.
Completely. He suddenly claimed that, actually, a gang of 3 Chinese men had kidnapped Huang Na. Said he'd seen it but was too scared to say anything earlier.
Blaming someone else, that's a big shift.
A huge red flag. Police suspicion ramped up considerably. They decided, okay, let's get him to take a polygraph test, a lie detector.
But he never made it to the test, did he?
No. This is a critical point. They stopped for food at a restaurant on Pasir Panjang Road, supposedly on the way to the station for the test. Took asked to use the restroom and just bolted. Ran off.
How did he get away?
Took a taxi to Woodlands, near the border, and then somehow managed to cross the causeway into Malaysia, back to his home country. Apparently used an unguarded route.
Fleeing the country right before a lie detector test? That doesn't look good.
Not at all. It basically cemented police suspicions. Malaysian police caught him after about 9 days, and he was extradited back to Singapore.
What was his explanation for running?
He claimed he felt pressured, unsafe with the Singapore police. Said he just wanted to see his young son back in Malaysia, who was about 14 months old then.
His family defended him too, right?
They did, publicly. His father said he was innocent, just scared by the police. His wife, Yuli, said called her from Johor. Say others took Huang Na, but the police were, hounding him.
And his brother described him as timid, cowardly even, incapable of something like this.
Yeah. Took himself, even spoke to the media at one point, saying he loved Huang Na too, had his own son, asked people not to judge without proof. But his actions, fleeing, the changing stories, they didn't line up with Innocence.
So Tuk was back in custody, denying involvement. But the search for Huang Na had to continue. Police started focusing on the area near Tuk's new flat.
Right. His flat was near Teluk Blangah Hill Park, which is only a few minutes walk from his place, and maybe, say, 15 minutes or so from where Huang Na lived.
A plausible location to dispose of something, being relatively quiet, parkland.
Exactly. And that's where the awful discovery was made. October 31st, 2004. Police started searching Teluk Blangah Hill Park.
And it happened quickly, didn't it? They found something within about half an hour.
Eerily quick. They found a cardboard box tucked away in some thick bushes.
What kind of box?
About 50 by 40 by 30 centimeters.
Yeah.
Looked like the kind used at the wholesale center. It was sealed up tight with adhesive tape, and there was a terrible smell coming from it.
Oh no. Inside?
Inside, they found Huang Na's body, curled up.
Just devastating. The body was decomposed, I understand.
Badly, yes. Forensic tests were needed for a formal ID. But her mother was brought to the scene, and she confirmed, through her heartbreak, that it was her daughter.
The autopsy must have been horrific. What did it find?
It confirmed the cause of death was asphyxiation, likely strangulation or smothering. There were marks consistent with that.
And other injuries.
Yes, bruises on her body, suggesting some kind of physical assault. And the most tragic finding, evidence that she had been sexually assaulted with fingers.
Just awful. So the location near Tuk's flat was a major link, but they needed the actual crime scene.
Right. So police searched the storage room back at the wholesale center. A room Tuk's boss rented out, about the size of a living room. Tuk used it quite often.
And they found evidence there.
Signs of a struggle. Specifically, door and window panes had been removed. Police quickly suspected this was where the crime actually happened.
Based on all this, the prosecution started to piece together what they believed happened.
Yes, their theory, based on the evidence, was this. Around 1:40 p.m. on the day she disappeared, Tuk lured Huang Na into that storage room. Maybe pretending they were playing hide and seek, or maybe offering her a mango. They did find mango remnants in her stomach.
Okay. And once she was inside, isolated?
They believe he sexually assaulted her, undressed her, tied her hands and feet with straw rope.
And then, fearing discovery.
He killed her, suffocated or strangled her. The estimate was for at least 2 minutes. The bruises also suggested he might have horribly stepped on her or kicked her body after she was dead or dying.
The level of detail in the concealment was chilling too.
Extremely. He wrapped her body in 9 layers of plastic bags. 9 layers, then put her in the cardboard box and sealed it heavily with tape.
And he didn't dispose of the box right away?
No, the timeline suggests he waited. Around 5 p.m., he borrowed a friend's motorbike, went back to his flat for a while, watched TV apparently. Then around 8 p.m., he went back to the storage room, got the box, tied it to the motorbike.
And drove it to Tila Blanca Hill Park.
Yes, dumping it around 9 p.m. using the darkness. Then he returned the motorbike. That delay, the methodical disposal. It suggests calculation after the crime.
It really does. It doesn't sound like someone panicking uncontrollably, does it? More like covering tracks.
Exactly. And the physical evidence backed this up strongly. The adhesive tape on the box, it matched a roll found in that storage room.
With his fingerprints on the roll.
Correct. The plastic bags were the same type used at his workplace. And crucially, forensics found hundreds of tiny fabric fibers in the storage room. Fibers matching clothes worn by both Tuk and Huang Na. Strong proof they were together in that specific location.
And beyond the forensics of the crime itself, there were disturbing accounts from witnesses about Tuk's behavior towards Huang Na before all this, weren't there?
Yes, and this adds another difficult layer. His own employer, a man named Kevin Eng Som Meng, testified something quite alarming. He said back in July 2003, over a year before the murder, he saw bruises on Huang Na's hand.
And Tuk's explanation.
Tuk apparently admitted hitting her. Said she was being noisy and he was teaching her a lesson.
Chilling. And wasn't there another witness?
Yes, another packer at the market testified that Tuk would sometimes tie Huang Na's hands and feet. Just tie her up. When people questioned it, Tuk told them to mind their own business, claiming it was just their way of teaching.
Their way? That sounds incredibly inappropriate.
Deeply disturbing. Even Huang Na's mother remembered an incident on a crabbing trip. Tuk got frustrated with Huang Na and hit her. The mother specifically told him then not to hit her, to just talk to her if she did something wrong.
So these accounts, they paint a picture of someone capable of controlling, maybe even aggressive behavior towards this child, long before the murder.
These certainly raise questions about the nature of their relationship and whether warning signs were missed or misinterpreted.
Okay, so Tuk is facing trial. The evidence seems overwhelming. Singapore has the mandatory death penalty for murder. What was the defense strategy?
Given the evidence, their main angle was his mental state. The defense team argued that Tuk suffered from schizophrenia, or at least some kind of significant mental disorder.
How did they argue that?
They pointed to the sheer inexplicability of the act killing a child he seemed close to, treated like a daughter in some ways. They suggested this pointed to mental abnormality, maybe hallucinations or delusions driving his actions. His family also backed this up, reporting strange behavior back in Malaysia, talking about spirits, laughing to himself sometimes.
But the prosecution disagreed strongly.
Very strongly. They brought in their own psychiatrists who assessed Tuk and concluded he was not schizophrenic. They argued his actions showed the opposite of delusion.
How so?
They pointed to the planning. Luring Huang Na, the careful concealment of the body, disposing of her clothes separately, planning his escape, even trying to invent that story about the gang to shift blame. They argued all this showed a calculating, cool mind, fully aware of his actions and their consequences, not someone lost in psychosis.
So the trial proceeded. How long did it last?
About 13 days. And on August 26, 2005, the verdict came down. Tuk Lang Hao was found guilty. Guilty of both murder and sexual assault.
And the sentence?
Mandatory death by hanging.
Did the judge elaborate on the reasoning?
Yes. Judge Tae Young Kwang specifically highlighted Tuk's actions after the murder. The meticulous wrapping of the body, choosing bins without CCTV to dump her clothes, using the cover of darkness to dispose of the box in the park. The judge stated this careful, methodical behavior demonstrated a cold, calculating mind, fully deserving the death penalty.
Tuk appealed, I assume.
He did, in January 2006. He sought a reduced sentence. But the appeal was rejected. It was noted, though, that the decision wasn't unanimous among the appeal judges.
But the sentence stood.
It did. Tuk Lang Hao was executed by hanging at Changi Prison on November 3, 2006. The whole process, from the crime in October 2004 to the execution in November 2006, was relatively swift by international standard.
And wasn't there a photo released near the end?
Yes. Quite unsettlingly, a photo emerged of him smiling in prison, reportedly taken just days before his execution. Added a strange final note to the public's perception of him.
What happened to Huang Na's mother, Huang Su-ying, after all this? Her situation was complicated too, wasn't it?
It really was. She actually had a history of being an illegal immigrant in Singapore. She'd been caught and deported before. The report suggests she managed to return in 2003 by allegedly using a hot iron to alter her fingerprints to avoid detection at immigration.
Wow. So after the murder investigation, did she face legal trouble for that?
She did face issues over her immigration status, but given the horrific circumstances, the immense loss she'd suffered, the authorities decided not to jail her. She was allowed to return to Fuji in China.
Taking her daughter's ashes with her.
Yes. Huang Na's ashes were buried in a mountain cemetery near their hometown.
And do we know anything about her life since then?
Reports over the years suggest she eventually settled in Shenzhen with Huang Na's stepfather, Zheng Wenhai, and they run a business together. There was also a report around 2009 mentioning her selling shoes in Taiwan for a time, but undoubtedly her life was forever marked by this tragedy.
This case, the Huang Na case, it left a huge mark on Singapore, didn't it?
A massive mark. It really forced people to confront some difficult issues. Child safety, even within seemingly close communities, the nature of trust between acquaintances and neighbors. It also touched on issues like illegal immigration and maybe even the pressures of crowded living conditions.
Did it lead to any tangible changes?
It's often said that the case influenced stricter laws and standards in Singapore, particularly around child safety measures and perhaps immigration controls as well.
And it became something of a benchmark case, didn't it? Highlighting the way Singapore's justice system operated.
Yes, for many, it exemplified the system's perceived efficiency and decisiveness, especially in handling such a high-profile and emotionally charged crime.
Looking back at this deep dive, the story of Huang Na is just profoundly tragic. It really highlights vulnerabilities, especially for children, and the complexities of trust in our communities.
It absolutely does. And reflecting on it all, maybe a question for you, the listener, to think about is this. In a world that feels increasingly complex, how do we strike that balance? The balance between being vigilant enough to protect the most vulnerable among us, especially children, and fostering the kind of trust that healthy communities really depend on.
That's a tough one. Or perhaps consider this. The speed and finality of the justice delivered in this case really stands out compared to legal systems elsewhere. What does that contrast tell us about different societal approaches, different philosophies when it comes to crime, punishment, and what justice fundamentally means? Definitely something to ponder after hearing this story.